This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman.
This is Lauren Lester, the voice of Robin and Nightwing.
And you're listening to the DCAU Review.
Hosted by Cal and Liam.
Streaming at DCAUreview.com.
And on your favorite podcast app.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 329 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal, and with me is Liam, our other host. Liam, we have just finally, for the very first time in the 329 plus episodes of this podcast, completed an entire series, and we did so last month with the series that we all started with way back in December of 2017. So as we talked about last week, it's been a 7-year journey to get here, and somehow despite starting with it first, we also wrapped up with it first, and it having the most episodes, we wrapped up with it. But that's right, we wrapped up with Batman the Animated Series, at least the original run of episodes before it shifted to the New Batman Adventures, which technically is considered season 3 in some people's minds, or in the DVD's minds, but anyway, so with this week's episode, Liam, instead of kicking off a new series or, looking forward to what we're doing next, let's take a look back, a sort of review of all of the Batman the Animated Series reviews that we did, and kind of give us some perspective on why we started the podcast and where we are here, and compare it to some of those other things that inspired the podcast to begin with.
Yeah, that's right. So, this is quite a ordeal that we've undertaken over the last 7 years. But here we are. As you mentioned, kind of the origins of our show were that when the 25th anniversary of Batman the Animated Series was coming around back in 2017, every site had their listicles out with ranking all the episodes, or here's the top 10 best or top 10 worst episodes in some cases, and we were just sharing them back and forth and kind of discussing amongst ourselves, no, this episode should be higher, or this episode is way too high, and eventually that spun into us doing a Batman the Animated Series podcast that by the time we were actually launching it had evolved slightly to a full DCAU podcast. And if we had known that meant the Zeta Project at the time, maybe we would have just kept it at a Batman the Animated Series podcast. But hey, here we are. But yes, as mentioned, we have finally finished that original run of 85 episodes of Batman the Animated Series. And we're going to look back on some of our favorites, some of our least favorites. And since that was part of the origins, we're also going to look at some other places on the internet and what they say the best and worst episodes are, and how our personal rankings line up with those.
That's right. Yeah. So, not going to lie here. It was a bit of an undertaking trying to find all of our top ranked episodes and trying to figure out whose scores takes precedence over a top ranked episode. And because despite the fact that we agree so often, coming up on identical scores for what we've deemed top picked episodes, or the higher ranking episodes, is not as common as you would think, despite having 85 attempts at doing so. So when we look back at them, I think a lot of the episodes, Liam, that ultimately we agreed upon as far as our top ranked episodes are not necessarily the same score, but I think you can kind of agree that they're close enough for the qualification. But I guess if you want to look at what episodes did we say of our top episodes, what did we agree on was a top pick, or what scores did we have that were identical? Kicking off that list immediately, Heart of Ice, unsurprisingly, Emmy Award-winning episode. We've talked about it on end here. It's one episode that I will go back to over and over and over again. It's a piece of art. People ask me, I've had friends ask me, they ask me about my podcast. I tell them what it is. They're like, oh, I've never watched that before. And they're like, if I watch one episode, what would you recommend? And I say Heart of Ice. It's just the absolute perfect piece of animation to watch for that 22-minute time and get a really good story out of it, and some amazing music, great performances. It's the total package, and that's why our scores back on episode 22 were both 40 out of 40. Not surprising that one was the first perfect episode, and somewhat what we judge every other episode against when we're kind of coming up with these scores at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean we've talked about it. As mentioned, it was an Emmy winner. It's one of the first scripts that Paul Dini worked on for the show as the writer. Bruce Timm directed it. You have an incredible voice cast in that episode. The Mr. Freeze theme, which we kind of just recently got to revisit a few weeks ago when we covered Deep Freeze. Just haunting, beautiful piece of music by Shirley Walker, and yeah, it's pretty perfect. And again, as far as an episode, this seems old hat now, I think, because so many versions of Mr. Freeze, including in live action movies and other cartoons and comic books, have taken on this archetype for Mr. Freeze. But Mr. Freeze was just a guy with an ice gun before this episode came out.
Right.
Like, he didn't have a lot going on as far as interesting comic book stories other than a fun gimmick. And this just completely reinvented the character. It made him one of the most interesting. It took one of the most generic, uninteresting Batman villains of the whole pantheon and made him one of the, if not arguably the most interesting one in the whole Rogues Gallery. So it cannot be understated the impact this episode has. It's like, to me, I mean, Harley Quinn probably also up there as far as the biggest impact this series had. In fact, not even close. She's a pop culture icon now. Mm-hmm. But other than Harley, if you take Harley out of the equation for a moment, I think it's the redefining of Mr. Freeze that you could argue has the most impact on everything that came after it, as far as adaptations of Batman and even more of the source material in the comic book pages.
Indubitably, yeah. It's hard to put it better than that. Our next perfect episode, Liam, that we both agreed was a perfect episode would have been episode 92. So quite a bit of time there. We had 70 episodes. Not all Batman the Animated Series reviews in between there, of course, but about 70 episodes worth of podcast there between our perfect episodes. But our next agreement of a perfect episode was episode 92 with Heart of Steel. Another really just heart-wrenching and interesting story. There's some mystery to it. There's some romance to it. We get the introduction of Barbara Gordon to the DCAU. Mm-hmm. We get some really, really heart-wrenching story and more tragedy with our villain, who's really not even a villain. He's just kind of a mad scientist that is doing everything he can to deal with the loss of his daughter. And he uses this supercomputer to create a replicant of her, and no real world implications here. The robot then pushes itself forward and decides that for all humanity, the best thing for them is to replace all humans with synthoid robots. And the humanoids are going to replace humanity in order to avoid any potential mistakes occurring. And the robots begin replacing different people in Gotham City, both in leadership and in and around Gotham. So Batman has to ultimately go up against a bunch of robot versions of some of his best friends and some of the leaders of Gotham and save them all. With the help of Barbara Gordon before the end of the day, as she's involved because Jim Gordon is one of those that's been replaced by a synthoid. So mm-hmm. It's a two-parter. So there's some intrigue and some cliffhangers that are kind of left after part one and tied up. But again, another one of those things where the music works together with the plot, some really great animation. Mm-hmm. Kevin Altieri, the director of the episode, did a wonderful job, friend of the show. Definitely would love to have him on at some point to talk about that. Just give us some perspective and thoughts on that. But man, what a overall, just like, it's just a fun thing. And not only did you make one episode that was interesting and good and perfect, but between the two of them, we said, you know what, this is good enough to give it a perfect score all across the board here.
Yeah, it's funny because we often joke about how we forget everything we say after we are done recording. Like, I don't know if I would have guessed this was a perfect score from both of us. Not that I don't love this episode or these episodes, because I do, but yeah, I mean, it's great. The thing that always sticks out of that is there's like a real like invasion of the body snatchers, like creepy element to the different scenes where the real people are meeting their robot duplicates and then getting kidnapped. And then the final bit where Batman's running around in the lab, and all the robots start like crawling around like spiders and stuff. Just some really really incredible and creepy imagery. The Bullock bot going through the bat signal. Just some really incredible some visual work on there, some really creepy stuff in there that, again, we've talked about before. You get away with a little bit more of extreme violence as well because it's a robot, even though it's a robot that looks exactly like your real human characters.
Mm-hmm.
So some really fun some fun violence as well in that one that you couldn't get away with on a real person in this show. So yeah, I think the visual component of that one is maybe what stands out the most to me from that one, as well as great voice acting and some great music as well.
Absolutely. And we would then jump another 109 episodes forward before our next unanimous perfect score. And we weren't alone. We were joined by a very special guest correspondent, that being Jordan Gibson, who, of course, was responsible for the artwork in two of the issues of the Batman: The Adventures Continue comic. And, just a lover of all things Batman, the animated series. We had a really fun time reviewing the entire episode with Jordan. And just really unsurprisingly, maybe, since it's a direct sequel to our prior episode, actually maybe it makes it more surprising that the sequel was as good as the prequel. But yeah, we ended up giving perfect 40s across the board. So 3 perfect scores ended up, that's the sole designation of 3 perfect scores on this entire list. So yeah, another one that maybe I didn't remember that we had given such high marks to it, but I think from my recollection, I know a lot of it is that episode is built on the back of the late great Kevin Conroy's performance, not only as our true Batman, but the synthoid Batman that attempts to both kill our Batman and also destroy the city. We have Batman talking with a robot Batman at the end, trying to reason with him recognizing and realizing that if he truly was Batman, that he couldn't do what he was about to do. So we have this struggle between his created nature versus his programming and who he really is. It's really fascinating. It's a very it's kind of, if you think about it too hard, your mind might hurt a little bit. But that same thing, you brought back some really great music for that. But the performance from Kevin Conroy, I think, is probably what I will always remember about that episode, especially not only the final scene where the countdown is happening on the clock to destroy Gotham and him coming to grips with the music swell of realizing, he can't be Batman if he's doing this. And then ultimately Alfred and our true Batman, once the robot is defeated at the end, sort of having this conversation about whether or not this robot had a soul. And it's moving. It's giving me chills just thinking about it.
I think it's tough to say this because I think you make a good point that this is technically a sequel. So it would be hard to say that this is the single one I would recommend to someone, but this is way up there for me.
It's good.
I think this, if you were, again, we'll see what else we gave perfect scores to. So maybe there's another one that I'm going to hear in a moment that'll change my mind. But I think this is my favorite episode of the whole series.
Wow.
That dichotomy of a Batman duplicate that is built so well that he overrides his own programming to kill and to replace, because Batman would never do that. Batman would never kill. Batman would never take lives. It's so pure. And so it's just a great distillation to me of what Batman should be. And it's the idea that that's kind of the turn. Like it almost seems hokey. I feel like if you just said that, like the Batman robot can't kill because Batman doesn't kill, but the way it's done in the show, and again, to your point, so much of that comes from the incredibly dramatic Shakespearean work of Kevin Conroy in that episode, along with the score, is just unbelievable. And yes, that the final moment when he's looking at the countdown on the screen, and he looks at it and he says, "My city, my people," and he starts smashing the computer. And he's screaming at the top of his lungs at the same time. It yeah, it gives me it really makes me emotional to think about it. And it's one of those ones that, especially now, obviously having Kevin Conroy having passed away over the course of the time we've been doing this show, where we almost kind of joke about like, what else can we say about Kevin Conroy that we haven't already said? But that is one where it just makes you go, whoa.
Yeah.
Like he's even better than I remembered somehow. Like I already thought he was the greatest Batman actor in any medium ever, and somehow he still surprised me by how good he was in that episode. So
yeah,
it's pretty much, it's a perfect episode in my book, and obviously as reflected in all ourselves and Jordan giving it a perfect score.
That's right. So that would wrap it up, Liam, as far as the entire run of those first 85 episodes for a unified front of a perfect score. However, we each share an additional episode that we gave a 40 out of 42. So going way back to episode 35, that was when we covered Feet of Clay. You gave that that episode a perfect 40 out of 40 yourself. I was very close, right there with a 38 out of 40. That's interesting because obviously we know the first episode, I believe, was an ACOM episode. Yes. And then the second one is the TMS episode. So the fact that, and we reviewed both episodes together. So for the majority of the two-parters we've ever reviewed, it's been one episode and we give one episode of the podcast and we give one score for both parts. So we are grading this as a whole. So the fact that the poor animation from Feet of Clay Part 1 was enough, like you were able to give it a high enough score to reach that 40. And I think mostly it's based on, more than likely, that final incredible piece of artwork that TMS did with the transformation scene. But again, I think looking at the other categories too, it's a testament to some incredible music. It's got really great voice acting from our voice actors. And then you also have tremendous visuals and a story that takes another one of those Batman villains that's had a varying different versions of their origin story, as we discussed. The most recent Batman Caped Crusader did a more classical take on his origin story versus some of the other comic versions that have been a little bit more silly or a little bit more sci-fi. This one takes the sci-fi aspect, but then makes it and injects it with a high dose of tragedy and morose, feelings and attitudes. And it's the fact that one of us was able to give a 40 out of 40 to this, I think is just a testament to great things across the board there. So another great episode that is on a lot of people's top lists.
Yeah. I think for me, this one, it is very much the part 2 animation that maybe kicks it up. But I mean, Ron Perlman as Matt Hagen and Clayface gives an amazingly nuanced performance, because he does kind of have that cackling, like Saturday morning villain bit in some of those scenes where he's kind of taunting Batman when they first meet up in the hospital in part 2. And then towards the end there, when he's looking at the monitors and everything. But the scene when he's kind of first transformed at the beginning of part 2, and his friend that's always hanging around with him in those episodes is trying to tell him like, oh, you could still do it, you can still be the actor, and he kind of has this really dramatic breakdown, and says, I'm not an actor anymore, I'm not even a man. And it's just this really powerful scene. Yeah, the Clayface theme is another beautiful piece of music as well. So I think the voice acting, plot, and music probably lift up part one a little bit, and then all four are home runs in part two. So definitely something. Probably now, if I revisited that, I wonder. I wonder if I would still say it's a perfect score, but I certainly don't regret it having, because I do think of that as one of the better ones of the whole run.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we'll talk about it here in just a second, but you're not alone in thinking that that's really good. It ends up on a lot of people's top lists. So
Right.
I think we talked about, well, we can't go back and change things, and maybe you would change something here or there, but I mean, it's a point in time that I think we can look back and say this episode is fantastic, and a lot of people agree with you.
Absolutely.
Moving on, Liam, to the other 40 out of 40 that we gave. Sorry, I gotta find it here. Jumping forward to episode 81. That was our other perfect score, Liam. You gave it a 38 out of 40. I gave it a 40 out of 40, and that was The Laughing Fish. So an episode that we've talked about here before. It's it's a somewhat of an adapted story from a couple of different comics, but Paul Dini wrote the episode and did so with such precise writing that he is balancing, as we've talked about it maybe half a dozen more times on the show, the killer and the clown, and the idea that you have episodes of this series where the Joker is trying to blow things up. He's got killer toys. He's kidnapping people. He's trying to blow up casinos. He's poisoning the city with laughing gas on a garbage trowel. Like, we have all of these different wacky stories, but then this one ends up really being one of, if not the wackiest, where he is trying to he's mad at a copyright lawyer for not being able to copyright his smile.
On a fish.
On a fish, right. And it leads to some of Mark Hamill's performance as the Joker in this episode, absolutely unforgettable. There's just so many quick-witted one-liners, just sight gags, things that happen between him and Harley, the filming of the commercial for the Joker fish stuff. The pinnacle of the episode, or the crescendo of the episode coming to the end there, in that final third act of him holding Harvey Bullock over the shark tank by a fish hook, and Batman having to ride the shark around, and ultimately it ending on sort of this cliffhanger on whether or not the Joker himself was eaten by a shark at the end. It's so good. It's just, the music is great too, because you have some of the classic Joker theme, but you also have this homage, I would say, to a Jaws-like theme that plays in once they've entered the aquarium where the shark is. I want to go watch it now just talking about it. It's another one of those episodes, and while Mark Hamill again is the lead and is getting a lot of the focus, Arlene Sorkin has some really great one-liners and great lines in that episode also.
George Zunza, as would go on to play Scarface, the ventriloquist Perry White, but his role as G. Carl Francis, the copyright clerk, is no less iconic, I think, at least in our show's mind.
Oh no, absolutely. Robert Costanzo as Bullock in the episode is really good too. Has some really funny lines. And then of course Kevin Conroy gets to play the straightest of straight men against the Joker's just insane commentary the entire episode. So it's a fun episode overall. I think maybe surprising when I'm thinking about it is, was there something in the animation that I really loved. Maybe it was just something that looked really good, and then the facial features and some of the expressions that the Joker has. I like in my head, I can see the picture of him holding the fish and pointing to it while he's talking to G. Carl Francis. So maybe that had something to do with it. But yeah, that's another one. Also ends up on a lot of people's top lists, and maybe not surprising that I agreed with it, and you were right there with me with a 38 out of 40. All right, Liam. So from there, what we're going to do now that we've tackled all of our top picks there, our tippy top picks, our perfect episodes, we're going to now just take a look at our near and dear friend, a silent sponsor in the world of the DCAU review, the IMDb, the Internet Movie Database. Not really a sponsor here. They've never given us a dime. We just pretend like they sponsor us sometimes. But the silent partner, the IMDb here, we always give them a shout out at the beginning of our episodes. Ever since probably about halfway through our reviews, we've given the IMDb synopsis for the episode. We mock it at times. We have fun with it. We give it its own rating and ranking. But we turned to the IMDb, the Internet Movie Database, to look at what are the top 5 ranked episodes according to IMDb ratings. And so we'll take a look at those, and then we'll kind of compare our own scores to each of those episodes as we go through here. So we will start, Liam, with number 5 on the list for IMDb. So coming in at number 5 is the episode Perchance to Dream, which comes in with 9 stars even out of 2.7 thousand reviews. So Perchance to Dream, this one, I think maybe when we started was probably one I would have guessed we would have ranked pretty high. I don't know if I had in mind what a perfect episode would be other than maybe Heart of Ice. I think both of us can admit we probably try to come in pretty unbiased. Like, obviously we have episodes that we like, but coming in like, all right, I'm not set on a score when I'm coming in here. I'm going to judge this episode critically. So, but right. With that being said, Perchance to Dream's an interesting one because it's, this whole episode that revolves around what if Bruce Wayne wasn't Batman? What if Bruce Wayne had everything he ever wanted? What if he was happy? What if he actually got to be a happy adult with a normal life? And would he be satisfied with that? And we learn ultimately the answer is no. He's not happy with that. And he has to get to the bottom of just why there is a Batman, but it isn't him.
Yeah, it's a fun episode because they kind of there's like a very brief cold open to that one, but you don't really know what's going on. He wakes up in his bed after chasing some nondescript bad guys the night before, and he's trying to piece together what has happened. And then his parents walk in, and he goes to work, and he meets his fiance, who's Selena Kyle, and then he sees Batman, which I always think is an interesting part of that. The idea of like, even within his fantasy, there is a Batman. There is a guy out there doing what needs to be done theoretically in this fantasy. But because it's not him, he knows it's not right. Like, there's just something gnawing at him that he can't quite to give apart. Of course, yes, as the reveal comes pretty late in the episode that it's a Mad Hatter plot to keep him out of his hair. It becomes a really interesting episode in what he is willing to give up in what he is leaving behind in this fantasy world in order to go back to a life that is kind of filled with tragedy. Obviously, now talking about it in this way, it's like, oh, it's kind of for the man who has everything, which that's one of my favorite episodes, Justice League Unlimited. So maybe that's what attracts me to this episode as well. I do think it's a fun episode. I feel like we saw it a lot growing up, so maybe it didn't seem as special. So I certainly still like it, and if memory serves, we still gave it pretty decently high scores. Looks like a 36 for me and a 34 for you. So it's not as if we didn't like the episode, but I think it's a good episode. the revelation being a Mad Hatter thing is interesting, and the idea that he tried to give Batman his perfect fantasy just so he would stay out of his way, because he was tired of him interfering with his plans to make a girl marry him or whatever.
Right.
It's kind of a fun. That's a very fun and Batman villainish plot.
Right.
So yeah, there's some, and again, I think it comes down to, really, it's like a tri performance, not dual. It's a three pronged performance from Kevin Conroy playing Bruce, playing the fake Batman within the dream world, and also playing Thomas Wayne in that episode. Right. So another great job for him. Roddy McDowell as Mad Hatter also gets some shine, and yeah, it is a fun episode. Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. also has some pretty funny moments as Dream Alfred as well. So there's some fun to be had across that episode.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, our scores are nothing to sneeze at. It seems like obviously it didn't make our top 5 episodes, but it's still pretty high ranked. So I wouldn't necessarily say that we disagree that it's a good episode. So it's certainly not an egregious. We wouldn't pull out the disagreement alarm, I'd say, for this one. So I think it's more than acceptable to say that this could be in the top 5. Moving on, Liam, we just talked about it, but number 4 on IMDb's, which I would dare say that this is too low, but hey, it's a subjective list here. Batman the Animated Series, episode number 4 here on IMDb's top 5 episodes, according to rating, is Heart of Ice, which gets the same amount of stars, 9 stars out of 10 and 4.3 thousand rankings for this one. So nearly double the amount of people have rated this episode. So 9 stars for Heart of Ice. We just talked about it. It's a piece of art. I think it's the episode, if you're going to point to one to watch. And, I would argue it's number 1 or number 2. So my only nitpicking here is this is too low on the list.
Fair.
Number 3, Liam, is going to be Two-Face Part 1. So again, we reviewed Two-Face as a single episode, so gave it a single score versus IMDb's rating episodes Part 1 and Part 2 separately. But Two-Face Part 1 comes in at number 3 with 9.1 stars out of 4.1 thousand ratings. So this one, another one of those episodes, maybe the trifecta of tragic Batman villains here, if we're talking about a trinity of BTAS tragedies. The Two-Face story here, we see a character that was established early on in the series, has this friendship that's set up with Bruce. He's involved in a couple of other episodes as the district attorney, and then we get the fall from grace. And I rewatched this episode a couple of months ago just for fun, and man, what a story. What a great episode. Visually, it's striking. Friend of the show, Kevin Altieri, responsible for directing. The reveal at the end of Part 1, once he's gone through this accident, just the unraveling of the Harvey Dent character, who really, in this world, he didn't do anything wrong. In fact, he's standing up to the bad guys. He's being blackmailed because of his mental struggles, and because of the stigma and everything that comes along with that, he's trying to go and essentially stand up to the bully. And in the process of standing up to the bully, he gets, disfigured, and ultimately the rest of his life is spent trying to exact revenge on both the person that did it, and then basically just doing crime. He unravels a little bit further, just becomes a mob boss and tries and commits crime after that. So, and
gets a credit card in the name of Two-Face.
That's right. But this episode, at least, you have the other aspect of the romance that we have with his fiancée Grace, and sort of the tragedy that comes along with that, him feeling like he's no longer worthy of her love, or that she wouldn't be interested in him because of his disfigurement. His mental struggles continuing to break down and him really giving in to this dual nature and things needing to be decided by chance and a coin, and that's the only thing that he can trust and really believe in is chance now, because that's what turned him into Two-Face. That's what, has given him everything in his life. So this episode, like we said, ends up on number 3 here. Nothing to sneeze at with our scores. Another one that we were pretty favorable with, but probably lower than I would expect. I gave it a 30 out of 40, and you gave it a 27 out of 40. So this was early on in the podcast, episode 10, so way back there, and I think we've talked about it at some point, that we were a little hesitant probably at the beginning, like, oh, well, this can't possibly be, a 35 or 40. Not to excuse whether or not we would go back and change it. Our scores are our scores, but we were probably a little bit more conservative at the beginning. I know I was, and I know you said you were, as far as giving out higher scores for things. So maybe one we'd like to have back, but maybe a miscarriage of justice there on our part.
Yeah, I mean, I just think the music alone in that two-parter, which I shudder. I looked and I apparently gave music a 5 in that episode. Sounds insane to me. I think underrating music became a theme of my early reviews on this show. Because I
didn't do much better. I gave it a 6, and that's one of the more iconic. It's one of the more iconic episodes as far as music is concerned that sticks out to me.
For sure. I do think at least part 2 is an ACOM, so that does that maybe does bring it down a little bit. But yeah, no, I think that episode is just it's so strong. Again, incredible script for both. This is for both parts, and then really interesting the sort of personal guilt that Bruce Batman feels for letting his friend get injured in the line of duty, that he couldn't save him, and how that he has the dream sequence where that sort of represents his ongoing guilt of the people he can't save, and the sort of underlying guilt that Batman has for not being able to save everyone, even though you can logically say I can't save everyone, but in his heart of hearts, that's a failing to him. And the way that's represented and sort of his hesitance to go after Two-Face, and then I think maybe losing Kevin Conroy and the great Richard Mall as Harvey Dent, who is magnificent across those two parts, both as Harvey Dent. Again, talk about a vocal transformation, just incredible. And then what I always think about, which maybe one of the defining endings of any episode, where Batman's flipping the coin into the pot, into the fountain, and he gives where there's love there's hope, but a little luck couldn't hurt. I think about that a lot. I think about that one a lot when I think about the best endings maybe of any episode we've covered. So the very melancholy, but just even at the end, he still hasn't completely given up that his friend, which obviously is a theme that comes back in future episodes. So that's a great one. Even if it doesn't, I don't know that it would be in my personal top 5. Actually, I know it wouldn't be, because we just went over what our personal top 5s were. But I would say that's deserving of being in the conversation. I don't think I would have it as high as 3 by any means, but it's in the conversation, sure.
It might end up being on my on another little bit that we'll cover here in a second here when it comes down to it. But let's move on to our number 2, Liam, on the list of the top 5 ranked IMDb episodes. Coming in at number 2 is the friend of the show, Dan Reba directed episode, and probably one of the most memorable. If you asked the layman that watched the Batman the Animated Series episode, that would be the episode Trial, which comes in at number 2, also with 9.1 stars out of 2.2 thousand reviews. This one, Liam, I feel like it's got to show up on lists just because of the fun factor. It's Batman trapped in Arkham Asylum. You have almost every single villain in the episode interacting together. Maybe one of 2 or 3 episodes where that occurred in that original run. It's a Paul Dini co-written script. You get some really great music by Harvey Cohen, who's responsible for the music for the episode. Memorable one-liners. You have the Joker dressed up as a judge. You get Harley Quinn in the episode. You get Two-Face. You get some cameos from some of the other villains also. And, it's a fun episode, and so fun that they almost made it a direct-to-video movie follow-up. But then was kind of shortened ended up being shortened just to the 22-minute episode for the series. But it's a fun episode. Either way, Batman has to team up, or begrudgingly, the district attorney that replaced Harvey Dent is forced to defend Batman in a mock trial set up by the villains in Arkham Asylum, who are convinced that if they put him through a trial and a jury of Batman's villainous peers convict him, then they'll feel better about the fact that they can just do away with him. It's also sort of holding up a mirror to a very vocal Janet Van Dorn, who is shown in this episode as being super critical of Batman, and also kind of trying to turn the tide of public opinion on Batman as being more of a cause for all of the creations of his own rogues gallery. A lot of the Reddit the Redditors could probably identify with her stance there, but it's interesting because at the end of the day, they all, not only she but the villains themselves, sort of come to the conclusion that they're responsible for their own madness, and they would be doing this whether or not Batman existed or not. So Batman really can't be found guilty, even though they then try and kill him anyway. So yeah, this is a really good episode. It's a fun one to look back on. Our scores, again, another one of those where maybe a point up here, a point up there. Our music scores weren't as high as I assumed that they would have been for somebody having that many villains in it, but maybe we were critical that they didn't squeeze all the villain themes in for the episode. But we ended up both settling on a 35 out of 40 for that episode. So still really good, just didn't quite crack our top 5. So I don't think there's an argument to be made here that this can't be in your top 5. It's a good, fun episode.
Yeah, I think it's memorable. I would say, based on the one we're going to talk about next, as the number 1 on IMDb, I think you don't need 2 of these in here.
Fair. Yep.
Spoiler alert.
More than fair.
So, and I think the other one is maybe a bit more iconic, as we'll get into in a moment. But no, it's a blast. It's a really fun episode. It does, again, it gets into the heart of a frequent criticism, both in universe and out, and in our real world, of superheroes and Batman in particular. So it has kind of an interesting meta context to it, as well as just being kind of a fun excuse for Batman in behind enemy lines and trapped in a prison with all of his rogues gallery. It's a lot of fun. You got, again, you talk about star-studded voice cast. You have Richard Mall, you have Arlene Sorkin, you have Mark Hamill. You have I think Roddy McDowall is Mad Hatter, George Zunza as the bailiff, ventriloquist, and Scarface. So maybe the voice cast alone, just getting all those greats together. Diane Pershing is Poison Ivy. So there's plenty of reason. I don't begrudge anyone that would have this on the list. It wouldn't make mine, but it's hard to nothing. It doesn't offend me that it's here.
Sure, no, absolutely not. Not much more to say about that one. And coming in at number 1, Liam, on the IMDb top 5 list of Batman the Animated Series episodes, according to the IMDb rating, maybe unsurprisingly, almost got him. Came in at number 1 with a 9.2 star rating out of 3.1 thousand reviews. This one, Liam, I think we've talked about it. This might be the one episode that most people remember for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
It's an incredible idea to have all of these villains in the episode. You have Joker, Two-Face, the Penguin, Killer Croc, Poison Ivy, all meeting up to sit down and talk. Not only are they just talking and trading old war stories, but they're doing so while playing a game of poker at a card table in a seedy, smoky bar. Just for multiple reasons. And then we get to see, as you're watching, you get to see all of the stories that they tell, the different things that that happened and how Batman foiled their plans. And then we get this little kind of tacked on story at the end that shows how Batman is still able to get him even when they're not expecting him to get him. And we covered that episode back on episode 131. And we were joined with a special guest correspondent, Monica Kubina, best friend of the show, colorist on the Batman The Adventures Continue comic books, amongst other comic book properties that she's done artwork for. But yeah, this is the one I feel like directed by Eric Radimsky. It's the one that I think most people remember. If you were to say, hey, did you watch Batman the Animated Series as a kid? They're probably going to say, yeah, I remember that one where all the villains were playing poker at the table.
Yeah, no, it's lovely. It's just a fun episode. It's very interesting. I remember like real world stuff about recording that one because we were recording it, and I think I had been exposed to COVID that week. So we were like sitting apart and masked up, and then we had Monica over Zoom. So I remember like some real world stuff that was going on. So it was a nice escape, height of the pandemic. It was kind of nice to have. It was, I mean, always great when we can get Monica on. Hopefully we can have her back soon. But yeah, I remember like how fun it was to review it. I think is kind of what sticks out to me now. But yeah, it's just a blast. You get all the different villain stories that all feel very appropriate. They all have these little vignettes, and then the grand finale of Batman rushing to save Catwoman is fun as well. So yeah, it's just a blast. And again, like what we just said about Trial, it's just fun how many great talented people are working on this episode from our regulars like Kevin Conroy and but to also have all of the villains here, and to have to do it in kind of these vignette styles. Paul Williams is the Penguin as well. There, Aaron Kincaid playing Batman playing Croc is also, I think, why this episode stands out as maybe the most iconic episode as well. The "I threw a rock at him" of it all is great. And again, it's one of those gags that rewards you, I think, more on repeat viewings when you go back and you realize that Batman is hamming it up while dressed as Croc to really sell the deception and coming up with these kind of funny lines. So never let it be said that the Dark Knight doesn't have a good sense of humor. But yeah, I love that episode. I loved reviewing it with Monica and you. And yeah, I can't argue with anybody who would put this at their top. Again, not my personal, probably wouldn't make it would be in my top 5 probably, maybe, but I don't know if it would be number 1, but hard to argue as far as just like personal favorites outside of score. Yeah, it is. It's the most iconic episode of the series, probably.
Yep, we all gave it a unanimous 38 across the board. So yeah, close to being perfect, but not quite there. But yeah, again, I don't think either of us would fault anybody if we're looking at it at saying, yeah, this belongs in top 5, top 3, top 2 discussion as far as everything working together in that episode to make it memorable and to make it everything we love about Batman the Animated Series.
Yeah, the other thing I remember about that episode, and I hope this comes across as a compliment because I mean it is one to Monica. When Monica started breaking down the visuals of the episode, being a professional artist as she is, I have never felt like more of a fraud in my life than listening to a professional break down why something is visually good or interesting.
Yes.
And me being like, yeah, it was cool when Batman is standing there, his cape's flowing in the wind. Like we love Monica. Genuinely can't say enough good things about how generous and kind she's been to us over the years. But that's the other thing I associate, other than the COVID of it all. The thing I remember is listening to Monica and just going, "Oh man, I don't know anything. I don't know anything. I'm an idiot. I would have never thought of that." Like she's incredible, and her analysis of that episode is especially incredible.
Agreed. And from there, Liam, we will now go to the unfortunate designation of the bottom 5 episodes. So instead of sticking with IMDb, we're going back in time to one of those lists that made its debut right around that time well, this one is technically in 2019, so a couple years after we started the podcast, but we're going to Collider.com, one of those wonderful listicles. This is an article by Phil Perello for Collider, and they put together their comprehensive list of every episode of Batman the Animated Series ranked. This goes from 96 all the way to episode 1. So I don't know what they included and didn't. I know there's new Batman Adventures on here. There's only 11 additional episodes that they included for some reason.
Well, I guess perhaps between like two-parters and
okay,
maybe there's some ties on the list along the way. I don't know, but
either way. Either way, the numbers don't quite math if you're mathing along with us, but I'm sure there's an explanation to it. But you can check this out. Maybe we'll put this article in the show notes if you want to check it out and check out all of Phil's opinions as far as their entire listing of the Batman episodes. But so starting off, Liam, we will start with the bottom 5 here. So we're not landing on Phil's lowest ranked episode. So number 5 from the bottom, we have The Mechanic. So this episode, of course, has an interesting storyline with it. We learn that there's an unnamed member of the Bat team that's responsible for building Batman's Batmobile. And what would happen if the Batmobile was corrupted and then thus therefore the guy that created the Batmobile was also blackmailed into trying to destroy Batman, courtesy of the Penguin. It's a silly episode. I know when we were growing up, this is one that we kind of enjoyed because of the wackiness of it. The Penguin gets to do that thing that he does in in Batman Returns, where he controls the Batmobile by remote, and while Batman is stuck inside of it, it's a Batman and Robin episode. So there's that. Robin co-stars in the episode. It's a little bit silly on the surface, according to Paul. Paul didn't like it because the only fun thing was that the flashbacks showed how Batman started or got the car to begin with, this version of the episode. But he calls it very mixed and at times poorly animated for the rest of the episodes. So what were our rankings for that episode?
Yeah, so you gave it a 30 out of 40, and I gave it a 27 out of 40. So not a home run in our estimation, at least based on our score, but not. I don't think this belongs near the bottom 5. I think there are. maybe we'll see what else is in this bottom 5, but I can. This would not be in my my bottom 5 list.
Well, it was. Yeah, it was not in our bottom 5.
I don't think it's interesting enough to me. This is if anything kind of like just boring bad, not interestingly bad or insultingly bad.
Sure.
Like maybe a couple of the ones we're going to talk about here are. So that's I would say disagree on this one, just because I don't think it's memorable enough to be to make it on to the worst of the worst. This would be, somewhere in the middle in my estimation.
It feels sort of like a comic that you would have seen in like the 80s run, where they introduced this like side character that had never ever been like in any of the Batman lore before, and they sort of try and set it up where he's going to be a character, but then he's just never heard of from ever again. Like you never hear about Earl Cooper and the Batmobile working on the Batmobile for the rest of the series. He never makes a cameo at any other point. So I understand it does feel sort of like a weird side quest and this weird introduction of a character that you've never seen before and never see again. And his daughter and the Penguin blackmails him into jerry-rigging the Batmobile to be remote controlled. But there's at least some fun, and Batman being a detective and Robin's there, and they kind of have to figure out what's going on and why the Batmobile's on the fritz. But it's not terrible. It's just kind of middle of the road based on our scores there. Almost good based on my score.
Yeah.
All right. And then number 4 from the bottom here, Liam, we have coming in another one that I remember vividly. Obviously it was not this list because this list has a date of 2019. Maybe it was updated since then and has an updated date, but I remember vividly this one being consistently on the worst ranked episodes, and I think my thought was, that's because whoever made that list doesn't understand Batman or doesn't understand the brilliance of this episode. So that's the episode, The Cape and Cowl Conspiracy, which of course features this guy who decides he wants Batman's cowl. He puts this other guy who's famous for creating traps. He's kind of like a bounty hunter trap setter, kind of a Saw before there was Saw. He creates death traps in order to blackmail people into doing things for whoever has hired him. So Wormwood sets up this trap that he's going to get Batman's cowl, and Batman has to escape several different traps. It's actually based on a Detective Comics number 450 story written by Elliot Maggin. So it's, according to Paul, he says it's overly plotted that finds Batman engaging in a long con. Oh, wait, is that the right one? Yeah, he doesn't even have engaging in a long con to trick Riddler into confessing to a crime that he does not warrant such an elaborate ruse.
It's not the Riddler. It's Josiah Wormwood.
Correct.
He does do riddles.
And he somewhat resembles the Riddler. He's got the same nose. He's got like the upside down question mark nose, but it is not the Riddler. So, no offense to the Paul that wrote this article, but maybe it shouldn't be the bottom if you don't know who the characters are.
Yeah. So again, not a top pick for either of us, but you had given it a 32 out of 40. I had given it another 29 out of 40.
What did we settle on for plot, out of curiosity? I would bet to say we really enjoyed this episode enough to give it a higher plot score.
Yeah, you gave it a 9 and I gave it an 8. So certainly nothing to sneeze at out there. As I mentioned, the writer of the comic, Elliot Maggin, came back to write this version as well. Yeah, I remember this episode being fun. Some of the different death traps are fun. And also that's like the Riddler doesn't really do death traps in the other episodes. So other than the fact that he uses like the riddles to like lure him to wherever the trap is, I wouldn't really say it's that Riddlery either. I guess using riddles is kind of Riddlery. But no, I like this episode. You have Bud Cort, who would go on to voice Toyman and Superman. Probably his more famous role, certainly. But yeah, I think it's a fun episode. The ending of where he is convinced that he's gotten the cape and cowl. He's gifting it to this foreign national that he's in league with, only to reveal that that foreign national has skipped town. And once again, another Batman quick change disguise episode is that fun reveal at the end of that one. I think is great. So yeah, there's fun. And then I remember really enjoying that last little bit where they're like fighting in like a gym, like a house gym. They end up in like a swimming pool, and he's trying to like hit him with a barbell and that. Yep. Like it's a really interesting environment for a final fight too. I don't know. I like that one. It's again, it wouldn't be anywhere near the top of my list, but it certainly would not be in my bottom 5 either. But
I remember us loving that Batman also wore a mask under his mask.
his little bandana thing that he wears underneath his
ninja mask under his cape and cowl mask. Although of course he did it on purpose because he was aware of the whole conspiracy here. I don't know if he wears one, to be determined if he wore one all the time. Probably not, based on some of the other episodes where he has his cowl removed.
Yeah.
Moving on, Liam, to the next episode on the list here. One that I think that wouldn't fall into our bottom 5, but I think if you would ask me, it probably would have, and that would have been Moon of the Wolf. So Paul's description says, Batman versus a wolf man, Batman versus a wolf man. Fans remember this episode for primarily 2 things. Batman fights a werewolf, which, isn't the worst thing ever, and that cheesy AF guitar stinger whenever our werewolf is on the scene, which is in the running for the worst thing ever. Trivia writer Len Wein adapted his own comic for this story. So Moon of the Wolf, I think we did like Creature Feature Month, if I recall, when we reviewed that episode, because it was that one. It was Tiger Tiger. We probably teamed it with something else. I think one of the
Terror in the Sky, I believe, is also in
yeah,
that month.
yeah.
So
So it was it's an interesting run of episodes there, to say the least. And I think maybe this was one that I assumed was not going to be great, but our scores definitely didn't reflect it as one of our bottom five. So I kind of have to. I think I don't love this episode by any means, but the scores that we ended up giving it didn't reflect it as the worst thing ever. And I think the guitar arguably is the thing that made it stand out as an episode, even if it isn't like what we were super used to when it comes to the episode itself.
Yeah, I remember liking the music for that episode. If for the trivia notes, I think we both gave music a 7 for that show. But yeah, I mean, I look, it's certainly not anywhere. I would say neither of us liked this episode. You gave it a 21, I gave it a 17. So it's not exactly one that we would rank highly. And this is an example kind of the reverse of what we just talked about with a bunch of the IMDb positive list. I don't argue with anyone. I wouldn't argue with anyone who put this on your bottom list because it's not good, but it's also just like, to me, it's just like it's just regular bad and not interesting bad. So it wouldn't make my my worst 5 episodes list, I don't think.
Have to agree with you there. And then number 2 on our bottom 5 original Batman the Animated Series run here. This one also might be one of the episodes that most inspired us to do the podcast. And that was because this episode frequently ends up on people's bottom list. And I may have also decided that we were going to break this down further than just beyond story, and like, hey, this episode really rules because the music is incredible. It's incredibly memorable. Maybe the animation lets it down, but boy, oh boy, does the music absolutely slap in this episode. And that, of course, is episode The Forgotten, which Paul says, while undercover as a hobo to help serve the mystery behind members of Gotham's homeless community disappearing, Bruce suffers a blow to the head and wakes up with amnesia. Worse, he's a prisoner in a chain gang that has links to the missing homeless. The episode is a largely skip-it affair, minus those incredible dream sequences depicting Bruce/Batman's true self battling with his presumed identity. I think we talked about, from my recollection, when we did this episode, the idea of Bruce struggling with the idea. It's interesting for the character to come to grips with this idea that despite all of his wealth, in addition to his desire as a crime fighter to stop crime and to help protect the citizens of his city, that at some point he's not going to be able to do it all, and that there has to be what can he do as Bruce Wayne and Batman to really help his city, and how at the end, he kind of gets out of this predicament with the homeless. He tries to help 2 different guys, give them jobs, and that's kind of the bow that they put on the episode. So maybe the plot itself we didn't love or feel all the warm and fuzzies at the end, because it's like, maybe he should have done a little bit more, or maybe he could have done something else, or shown that he learned something through this on how he could help more people. But that's reflected in our plot scores, because we gave it a 5 and a 4 respectively. But the rest of the episode we absolutely loved, because we ended up pulling our scores up to a 27 and a 29. So the music, unsurprisingly, 10 out of 10 for this episode. Absolutely incredible.
I think I also gave a +1 for music additionally as a bonus point. So I think I technically
you
gave
did.
an 11 out of 10.
It's technically an 11 out of 10 for Liam for the score for music.
Yeah, I melted our scale. And I gave it an 11 out of 10. There you go. But yeah, no, I think this episode is just pure fun. A lot of it, yes, comes from the soundtrack and how that acoustic guitar, like old Southern music.
Harmonica.
The harmonica permeates it. But it is interesting, and there's some quotes. I was looking at the DCAU wiki for this episode before we started, and there's some quotes from Bruce Timm about how it's like how tough it is to address a macro problem like homelessness in a 22-minute cartoon, and how he was worried that this episode would kind of feel exploitative because you're raising this issue and then not really solving it because you can't solve it in 22 minutes, which they kind of pay to, I think, in some of those dream sequences where Bruce is sort of seeing everyone offering the hands and he's trying to take care of everyone, and he kind of runs out of he can't keep up with it. Again, we've already talked about, there's like a thing about Bruce and his guilt and fear of not being able to take care of everyone, not being able to save everyone. So look, I can argue a lot. Like, I can really talk myself into liking the plot of this. The villain, Boss Biggest, I love that design. He's so revolting and funny, and he's eating whole turkey legs and stuff while he's yelling about how everyone around him's lazy. George Murdoch doing the voice on that one. Yeah, great. Alfred arguing with the Bat Plane, from Zimbalist Jr. and Richard Mall as the Bat Plane voice. Incredible. That might be my favorite part of the episode. It's the debut of the Gotham Desert, I believe, also. An iconic locale on our show, at least.
It might also be the first time we ever mention Taft from the Tick animated series also. So you'll want to check out that episode back in the archives, episode 7. Show.
Yes, but incredible. But yeah, there's some fun voice. Dorian Harewood as Riley screaming "My family" over and over again, that being the trigger to snap Bruce out of his amnesia, and that kind of really incredible sequence of all of the Wayne family swirling, and then the bats coming around, and then this kind of 360 shot where Batman turns towards the camera, and the theme plays, and then it sort of transitions back into Bruce, and you see his demeanor completely change. There's some great, as much as it is the music 1000% that would keep this from ever being anywhere near my bottom 5, my bottom 50 maybe. I do think there are some really fun moments for voice acting, and even again, I think just as a general plot of looking at Batman's gift. Again, to pay lip service to what Bruce Timm was saying, it is true though. At the end, it's like, well, he gives those 2 guys jobs, but yeah, homelessness is still a problem, and I don't disagree that that's probably that is a tough topic to tackle in a 22-minute cartoon. That's a lot of twos, a lot of T's. But yeah, I think they do a better job than maybe people give it credit for. And again, just listen to the music. You listen to the music and tell me that's the second worst episode of the whole series. I just couldn't be me.
That is fair. And then wrapping things up, Liam, the bottom list here, the worst episode ranked on Collider's 2019 listing of the worst to best Batman episodes of all time by Mr. Phil Perillo. Phil says the worst episode of all time is The Underdwellers. Phil says, the one where Batman goes into the sewers to stop an annoying villain with too many pet alligators who is also running a child slave ring. It's a shoulder shrug meh of an episode that you can't believe made it through production, let alone past the pitch stage. Honestly, even though it technically does not rank as our lowest rated episode of the entire Batman the Animated Series run, according to ratings, which we're going to discuss here in a second, it would be the bottom of the barrel for me. It is awful. We have somehow reviewed this episode twice on the podcast because our listeners are funny first.
The episode that broke or that is the reason why I will never ask for a specific episode in a poll again. We will let our listeners pick a show for us to review, but we will not let them pick the episode anymore. Correct. Because I will not. This will not happen again.
Democracy has failed us, is what we've learned.
That's right.
Is what we learned.
We have seized the means of polls production, and we will not be allowing any individual episodes to be picked by our listeners going forward. They we can't trust them with that sort of power.
That's right. Yeah. Liam, this episode is garbage. We've talked about it twice. We've discussed how, yeah, I agree with Phil here. Like how this episode made it past the pitch stage. Why an episode featuring a guy who has a gang of slave children, even in 1992, that feels like just like a bad thing. Like, and now you flash forward some 30 plus years later on, and it's even worse. It's just not good. It's not a good plot point. It shouldn't ever be. It's bad. It's in our bottom 5 episodes of the show. Yeah, it's not a good episode. The only thing that is the least redeemable about it is when Batman fights giant alligators, I think. That might be the most memorable thing about it. But I guess the subplot of Alfred chasing the mute slave child around Wayne Manor.
So yeah, it's just a weird episode. It's not good. There are implications of what he's doing to the children that I feel like are under the surface of that episode.
Yep.
Yeah, it's bad. That's produced so early on in the series run, and I know at the time there were a lot of spec scripts that were just getting written, not necessarily by people who would end up being staffed writers on the show, but they were just, we're producing 65 episodes or whatever that original batch was. We need scripts. So this one got in there, and look, I don't know. I hate it. I hate it the most because we've had to watch it twice, probably. I don't think it's as bad as a couple of the other ones, and I know we have the scores to back up that maybe it's not as bad, but it does hold a special place in my heart for the fact that we've had to watch it twice.
Yep, that's a designation. Third time would not be the charm for that episode. Mm-mm. Never again. It's a reason why we put it. It was the original bad episode jar. It was the Underdweller jar initially.
That's right.
Then changed to the bad episode jar.
Yeah, before Unity and Superman's Pal and whatever came along, it was the Underdwellers jar. So
right, and some of the other episodes we will discuss next year, Liam. In no particular order here. After Underdwellers, actually, I will go in order here. Fear of Victory would have been next on our bottom. This is an episode. So interestingly enough, Collider puts Fear of Victory at number 24 out of 96. 24. So Phil says, some fans really embraced this episode's all-out animated take on the consequences of Scarecrow's fear gas on Gotham's football team. Their transformation into nightmarish creatures is a true animation highlight for the series, along with some tweaks to Scarecrow's appearance. We still get chills watching the scene where Robin, high on panic fumes, teeters dangerously close to the ledge of a building. Batman also is served a very impressive final battle inside Arkham. Seriously, we could watch this fight for days. Disagree. Disagreement alarm.
What is he talking about?
I don't know what he's talking about as far as the Arkham fight. Sometimes I think maybe AI wrote this.
No, like they go to Arkham because it's like Robin's with the orderly or whoever who's been pretending to eat because Crane's out and they're pretending he's still there or whatever. So they're in Arkham, but there's no fight, I don't think. I think maybe you're confusing that with Dreams in Darkness, maybe.
Yeah, it sounds like it to me.
Well, you're not. Our intrepid writer here is. No, this episode's bad.
The Joker. I mean, the whole premise of the Scarecrow, as we've broken it down so succinctly, he is gambling on football games that he is affecting the outcome of with the use of his fear gas in order to make money off of the gambling to buy more chemicals to make more fear gas.
Yeah,
it's as succinct as that. He's a snake eating his own tail. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's so dumb. It's so dumb. Yeah, he uses powdered telegrams to infect football players, and I think they show like a montage of other athletes, like a tennis player and somebody to bet on sports, and that's even the great Fox Kids announcer. There's so many of those floating on YouTube of like tomorrow on Batman, that guy, and literally it's tomorrow on Batman, the Scarecrow bets on sports. And then on Tuesday, Mr. Freeze does his laundry. Like,
right.
It doesn't matter. This is so boring. What a dumb idea for an episode.
The animation isn't great too, from my recollection. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess maybe the transformation of monster scene is okay to look at, but from my recollection, it's like 10 seconds of a 22-minute episode that is otherwise not that great.
The shot of Robin swinging down to catch the vial at the end gets reused a lot. That's in the Adventures of Batman and Robin title sequence, and you will see that used in a lot of montages of scenes from this episode, especially ones featuring Robin. But no, it's not a good episode. I don't remember it being a particularly strong performance from Lauren Lester as Robin either, being one of his first, really one of his only episodes in that first however many that were produced. So yeah, it's not good, and it has maybe the dumbest villain plan of any episode we've covered to date.
That is right. So next, Liam, coming in on our bottom 5 episodes is going to be The Terrible Trio, which our writer from Collider here, Phil, did agree. It was just outside of his top, or his bottom 5, rather. He listed it at number 89. Again, this list also includes the new Batman Adventures episodes. So it's pushed into the 80s by one particular new Batman Adventures episode. But The Terrible Trio. It's a bad episode. Phil says what happens when Gotham is plagued by 3 over-the-top rich thugs armed with excessive Bruce Wayne-level wealth. Nothing too memorable. Despite an inspired premise, the low quality of animation for most of the back half doesn't help matters either. That's actually, I agree with that. It's a poorly animated episode. Their whole motivation to, like, they're thrill seekers who, because they're rich, they've lost the lust for life because they have everything they want, which on the surface sounds like that's an interesting, that's rich people probs, I guess, is what you would look at. Like, I have too much money to find the world interesting. What would happen if 3 guys decided to be supervillains? But instead of doing anything like really devious, they're just like stealing money. They're just running around and stealing things. And the animation is horrid in that episode. That's is that a Jade Animation, I believe, episode from my recollection? So yeah, poor all the way around. We gave that episode, I gave it a 16 out of 40, and you gave it a 10 out of 40. So low scores from both of us. I didn't mention either. Fear of Victory, 15 out of 40 and 13 out of 40 respectively. But back to Terrible Trio. It's bad. It's a bad episode all the way around.
Yeah. To me, this is one I would go, it's bad. It's bad because from a plot standpoint, because it's just not very interesting. Because anti-Bruce Wayne as a villain is kind of interesting. Like a villain with limitless resources dressing up in a costume is like, okay, that could be fun. But it's just not. It's just not interesting. And then, as mentioned, the animation is very poor in that episode. Some really bad like there's some Robin in that first scene. I keep the screen gaps on my phone because they make me laugh. He's like so squat and wide in some shots. Like it's a weird looking episode. A lot of people are off model. But
it created one of your favorite reaction memes of the Robin without any teeth.
Yes, the Robin kind of squinting like he's horrified at what he's looking at is definitely one I do keep in the chamber for
top 5 Robin memes.
Yes, agreed. Coming soon to the shorts, the Pod Tower shorts.
There we go.
It's bad because it's boring and also because the animation is bad. So it belongs there. I'm not sorry we skewered that one with our scores because it's no good. And
Bruce Timm hates it, so it's his least favorite episode.
He claims it's the worst episode in all of the DCAU, not just Batman or this was pretty far along when he said that. So that's high praise or low low
Low
the
high
opposite of
praise.
praise.
Exactly. Moving on, Liam, our next episode here, it's we're getting to some single digits here. And this one, I remember this episode being maybe one of the very first episodes where we were just unabashedly honest, and we were so angry about this episode. The score disparity, honestly, is funny now looking at it. I by no means love the episode, but I'm sure there's many episodes that are in this general vicinity of the teens. I gave it an 18 out of 40. You gave it a 9 out of 40. That was episode 78 of the podcast. Eternal Youth, which, speaking of 78, this would fall on number 78 on Phil's list here for Collider. So again, it's in the bottom quarter of his list here. This is an episode. I remember your hatred for this episode being because of Maggie. You hated the Maggie character so much.
It's just so weird. She shows up. She's never heard from before or since. Just Alfred has a girlfriend in this episode, but it's not like he meets her in the episode and it's like this meet cute thing. No, it's just some lady that they both already know. And then, yeah, the plot being that a bunch of rich people are getting invited to a spa where they're then turned into trees as punishment for their environmental crimes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Maybe there's a fun idea in that as far as a Poison Ivy episode goes.
It honestly feels a little bit like if it was done in 2024, it would be done to sort of needle people that are environmentally concerned. Like
there would be 6-hour YouTube essays about this episode if it came out now.
It would be the top story on MSNBC tonight that this episode was made. We'd have a lot of talking heads being upset about that. But I dare say, yeah, it's not a fun episode. Alfred is the focal point of the majority of the episode. The point where they're all turned into trees and then not. It's like, what are we doing here? Like, I know at this point we've had episodes where, a man has been turned into a giant mud monster. We have a guy who, has to live in sub-zero temperatures. We have a guy that was turned into a bat. Like we have fantastical science fiction stories, but we have literally the main character's butler turned into a tree and then transformed back into human form. Not using magic, not using any sort of anything other than this sci-fi fantastical gas. It's bad. It's a bad episode. Not good. In the bottom.
Yeah, I can't add much. Yeah, I can't add much to that. It's rough. It's rough going. Just no fun.
All right, Liam. So that would bring us to our bottom episode overall. Our worst ranked episode of Batman the Animated Series. That was episode 91 of the podcast. We were in sync with this episode. We both gave it the exact same score. The only episode of Batman the Animated Series for the DCAU review where we both gave it a single-digit score. And in fact, it was the same exact single-digit score. Cat Scratch Fever, which comes in as our lowest ranked Batman the Animated Series episode overall with a score of 9 out of 40 unanimously. This episode falls on number 85 on the list for Collider. Let's read Phil's description here. Selena Kyle goes full Catwoman on the wealthy and problematic Roland Daggett's latest scheme, which involves infecting stray cats with a virus that only his company has the cure for. As rainy day diversions go, you could do worse.
First of all, I didn't even remember that that's what they were doing.
It might not be because colliders. We've seen other descriptions not be accurate here.
That's true. I thought they were just like testing something, and it was making cats sick. Like it was like an animal testing firm for like cosmetics or something.
Yeah, that seems more on board with it, but
which is why a Catwoman would be mad about it because they take ISIS or whatever. But regardless of whatever that is, I'm not going to go back and check. So yeah, it's bad. It's a dumb episode. Like plot wise, it's not very interesting. Like the big climactic thing is Batman like fights a guy on a frozen pond. at one point. I think it might be the first Dr. Milo episode. I guess he's vaguely relevant, but no, it's not very interesting. And then yeah, it's an ACOM episode. It's the episode that, according to Bruce Timm, got ACOM Studios fired from the series. Even though they had a few more in production that would air later, it was this one that caused them to no longer be used in the back half of the series, just because of how poor it is. They had to retake, whole chunks of the episode. It was so unusable. So, yeah, and when you're watching it with that knowledge, you go, "This was the better version." It's rough. It's rough. It's just not a good episode.
Can we need to discuss I'm dying here reading the actual scores that we gave this. Plot. Liam, 1 out of 10. Cal, 0 out of 10. Voice acting. Cal, 4 out of 10. Liam, 3 out of 10. Music. Cal, 6 out of 10. Liam, 6 out of 10. Visuals and animation. Cal, 0 out of 10. Liam, 0 out of 10. Negative bonus point. Liam, -1. ACOM Studios. Cal, -1. Still canon. Oh my gosh, man, we pulled no punches. I mean, this whole episode we had to do it was a double feature episode, so we had to get the bad taste out of our mouth. It was so awful. Yeah, it's bad all across the board there. Let the scores speak for themselves. I regret nothing when it comes to this.
Yeah, no, it was bad. Yeah, I think it's that. It's the double whammy of plot and and animation being both so subpar. And then yeah, I don't remember any particularly strong voice acting performances, unfortunately. So, thank God for the soundtrack, or this could have been like a 3 out of 10, 3 out of 40 or something. So, hats off to Shirley Walker and the rest of her team, because otherwise this episode's probably even lower.
That's right. All right, Liam, let's wrap things up with our final portion of the episode here. We're going to each talk about kind of going through our scores here, episodes that kind of deserved a little better, as far as, episodes that maybe we didn't score quite as high as, or the scores didn't quite match what we eventually gave it. I mean, we could probably go through 4 or 5 different episodes here, looking at scores and being like, man, I would pick 10 out of 10 times I would pick to watch that episode. Like, I absolutely love that episode. I know,
right.
Grey Ghost, which of course is always in the top 3, 5 episodes of everybody, doesn't crack our top 5, but that's right. An episode that probably, I know, was let down a little bit by some of the animation, and that's why it doesn't fall into that top pick category for us. But,
or in my opinion, it's let down by the villain, but that was
there you go. That
was an early point of contention on our show.
There you go. One of the few that we've had. But yeah, I would say, I think looking back here, Two-Face, really, I think it comes down to Two-Face for me. We talked about it, our scores for that episode not being as high as we had, as I would expect them to be for one of the top tier episodes that are generally accepted as really good. We talked about animation letting down part 2 as being probably one of the reasons there. But as far as the tragic villain stories, it's one of the big 3 that this series tells. And like I said, I watched that episode I revisited it before we reviewed Second Chance a few months ago, and was just blown away by what an incredible story it tells. Some of that animation in part 1 is really, really great, and the vocal performances and the music. It deserves a better score in my heart versus what we eventually gave it, I guess. What about you?
Yeah, for me, it's Satana. I love that episode. We both gave it 27, so it's not like we skewered it by any means. But I think that really stands the test of time. I love any episode, because we don't get a lot that really examine what, beyond his parents getting shot, what made Batman who he is. So seeing this person who knew him before he put the mask on, and seeing her look at Batman for the first time, and the flashbacks we get in that episode, I think are just a delight. A little bit of how Batman got his escape artist bona fides is fun too. And then what it really comes down to, maybe more than anything, is that when I think of single scenes from this show, the last scene of the episode when they're saying their goodbyes after they've won the day and they've cleared Zatanna's name and everything's better, and he's revealed his identity to her, she just asks him what happened, like why do you do this, and he says a painful memory and a promise. And I think about that line all the time. I think it's one of the best lines in the whole show, and it's you could not sum up Batman any simpler than that. Credit to Paul Dini, the writer, on that one. But I love the interaction of Batman with someone outside of a Robin or an Alfred, or that really knows him and knew him before he put the mask on. So really, it is kind of just Alfred and Zatanna. Like, we don't have very many other folks, and Kyodai-ken, I guess, across the course of the series that knew him before he was Batman. So I love that dichotomy. The death traps, like the Indiana Jones death traps that they get into in that episode, are a lot of fun as well. They have to solve the ending where they're all struggling on the plane with like the net flying behind them, and they're tangled up in. I think is a lot of fun. And then like I said, just that final bit of them sort of parting as friends, and then she pulls the disappearing act on him, which I think is also a lot of fun. So that episode's just a delight to me, and is probably on the short list where, if I have a half hour to kill and I'm like, well, I want to watch Batman while I move on to whatever I do, that one's probably on the short list of comfort food episodes that I would just revisit 10 out of 10 times.
There we go. Well, that will bring us to the end of this review episode, Liam. That brings us to the action item for our listeners. We'd love to hear your thoughts here. We talked a lot about the episodes that we ended up ranking really high, episodes we ranked really low. In all seriousness, please don't just, you can, it's a free country, but please don't just tweet us like the Underdwellers is the best. But if there's an episode that we have ranked here in our bottom 5, or that deserves a second look, or, a second chance even, if you will, pun intended, then tweet at us, or at DCAU Review, or slide into our DMs on Instagram at DCAU Review. What episodes do you think are absolutely perfect? We'd love to hear those. What are your 40 out of 40s when it comes to episodes? Tweet those at us, slide into our DMs, comment on our posts, whatever. Let us know where that lies in. A big thanks to the Internet Movie Database website, and also all kidding aside, shout out to the writer of that article, Phil Perello, for Collider. Even though we disagreed and maybe disagree with some descriptions, all in good fun there. So Phil, if by chance you're listening to this episode, it is not personal. Thanks for taking the time to make a list like that for us to discuss here on the episode. But
absolutely.
Liam, we will turn the page and head to a new series next week, now that we are finished with Batman the Animated Series. We have some good fun coming up here in the month of October, maybe a bonus episode or two. In the meantime, we will once again ask our good friends at home, if you like the podcast and you would like to support the podcast, there's a couple different ways to do so. The easiest way, of course, is to subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app, whether that's on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or any of those other ancillary podcasts that pick up the feed. Please subscribe if they allow you to leave a review. A 5-star review helps us with every algorithm on every podcast platform, especially on Spotify and Apple. And then, of course, on Apple's, if you leave a 5-star review and you leave a little blurb, if we read it on the air and you're in the continental United States, we'll send a little thank you gift. One of our reviews just got their gifts, and they promptly added them to their vehicle. So shout out to our listeners, who are the absolute best for supporting us. So if you want to join them and get a free gift, do that little 5-star review for Apple Podcasts. And when we read it on the air and you live in the U.S., continental U.S., we'll send you a gift as well. You can, of course, also comment and participate in our exclusive Spotify blog or questions of the week and quizzes. You can comment on each episode also. That helps us a lot. And we will certainly do our best to engage on the episode as well. If you leave a question or a comment, we'll try and engage with you there too. Liam, as far as supporting the podcast, additional ways, check out the show notes. You can become a monthly supporter. We love our monthly supporters. We thank you to those that do give of their hard-earned dollars every single month to support this podcast, and have been doing so for years now to help us. We don't take that lightly. We understand the times that we live in and how precious the almighty dollar is. So the fact that some of you are willing to give of that and to encourage us to continue creating some fun podcasts on a weekly basis helps us out a lot. So thank you. And then, of course, you can check out the show notes. Also, there's a link to our store. You can check out the store and buy yourself a piece of merchandise. I still owe the listeners some new merchandise. So one of these days, I'll certainly get around to that before the end of the year. It's on the list. Liam, it's going to be a fun rest of the month here. I can't wait to continue reviewing DCAU stuff with you starting next week. It's going to be great.
Absolutely can't wait.
But until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we'll talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.